Hey folks, Andrew Sims here. I'm looking forward to getting to present to you guys my final SIA project on the Knoop Prairie in Dayton Airport in Dayton, Ohio. So I guess to press forward. So Knoop Prairie is a very beautiful, luscious expanse of basically just green space. It is 140 acres. It is home to countless amounts of plant and wildlife. Um, some of which include, mammals, migratory birds, butterflies, bees, and tons of bugs, different species of bugs and insects. Though most importantly, the Knoop Prairie is home within its boundaries to 120 acres worth of the Willis Creek watershed, which is a very important tributary to the Stillwater River, which is feeds into the aquifer that is further used for the main water source of the city Dayton. The Knoop Prairie was created in 1995. It's not actually natural. It was planted by the Allwood Audubon and is currently one of the oldest surviving reconstructed prairies left in Ohio. It is jointly owned, and this is kind of what we're going to talk about. But the prairie, it was jointly owned by the Allwood Audubon and the Dayton Airport. So unfortunately, the prairie, Knoop Prairie, became threatened due to the desire to grow economically. So long story short, the Dayton Airport, where the Dayton Airport owned the land and it leased it to the Allwood Audubon to kind of like for the upkeep of the land. The Dayton Airport pretty much abruptly ended the lease, kind of completely out of nowhere over the prairie land. And the Dayton Airport claimed that the reason behind this was that the area attracted Canadian geese to the area, which obviously, having birds in an area where planes are taking off and flying, it can be dangerous. If a bird were to accidentally fly into, a jet engine, that could be very, very dangerous. Though that claim was kind of made by the Dayton Airport was largely debunked because Canadian geese really don't prefer prairie lands with tall grasses because they prefer shorter areas of shorter grass where it's much easier for them to see and sneak up on their prey from, I guess, all over. So it was kind of a bogus claim to begin with, though that was still what they claimed, their reasoning why they did not allow the Allwood Audubon to renew their lease. And this was in 2007, which we'll dive into those details later. Though the proposed development, I guess the airport proposed to develop the land to increase the square footage of the and expand the airport's runway. And broader, they just wanted to open up the rest of the area up for just private development, for private investors to come in and bring their businesses, either it be Wendy's or whatever. And I looked around to poke at the economic impact that it is expected to have. It's kind of hard to find statistics on it, though. I did find that it's probably going to have a pretty significant impact on the economy in Dayton, upwards of 2,000 jobs and obviously millions of dollars of investment. So it's not it's not nothing, that's for sure. So I was actually lucky enough to be able to actually sit in a presentation actually given by two board members of the Allwood Audubon. And they gave a lecture through the School of Environment and Natural Resources here at Ohio State. So I was able to, get in contact with them to use bits and pieces of their presentation that I was able to see. And this was one of which, or one of those pictures that I captured and then put in my presentation that they obviously consented to. Though I think this timeline is very important because it kind of gives you a broader perspective of things going on. So we see in 1995 on the far left that the Paul Knoop Prairie was leased and planted in 1995. 2007, the airport ends the lease pretty abruptly, and then the rest of the details are kind of not super necessary to know. GM. There was talks of GM potentially buying a parcel of the land that fell through. But what is most important that you should gain from this is still today the Knoop Prairie, where technically Allwood Audubon is not leasing it. It still hasn't been developed on. So it's still prairie. It's still, it hasn't been leveled or anything like that. That's largely attributed to GM backing out of their contract, and then on top of that, then COVID-19 happening. So, and still to this day, really don't, there's really not a clear understanding of really what to expect. So that is good news, at least for folks that are trying to save the area and conserve the area. So here, this is a more of an aerial view of the project. So we see Allwood Audubon. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but you can see Allwood Audubon. I'm trying to circle it, but you can see the green space in the bottom of the page. Allwood Audubon, you have in the yellow here, Willis Creek. This is the 120 acres that is protected. And then you have in the orange here, towards kind of the center to the top of the picture, that is the prairie that is proposed to be developed on by the airport, because you have the airport that borders it to the right, and I guess that would be to the north. So yeah, and you can see that where the development will be happening is very close to the creek. Obviously, for many reasons, that could be very harmful. Yeah, so that can be very, very harmful, as we have learned through our environmental science classes that we've all had to take. I did a quick literature review to kind of broader get some context on other, airport reconstruction or redevelopment projects that have had environmental, social, or economic impacts, either positive or negative. I found that there are around 10 U.S. airports that are set for billion-dollar expansions, and some of these airports are airports that I imagine you've possibly flown on or at least heard of. You've got JFK, you've got O'Hare in Chicago, which is a huge one, ginormous one in Chicago. You have Dallas Fort Worth, some pretty significant airports. You probably at least recognize some of the cities: Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Salt Lake City. You know what I mean? The Newark Airport that's in New Jersey. So very, very kind of bigger cities. Found some. Try to search kind of the empirically reviewed opinion on kind of the broader shared impacts that we see in almost every airplane redevelopment project, or I guess airport redevelopment project. And a lot of those include, obviously the broader impact on climate change, just emitting the classic story of emitting carbon into the atmosphere, noise pollution. Airplanes are super loud, if you didn't know that. And then kind of more significantly, the impact on water use, water pollution, harmful impact on biodiversity, and increase in waste. And those last four are things that are very clearly seen with Knoop Prairie. So the comparative community I decided to use, I kind of had a hard time finding a comparative community, a comparative project in broader just community. So I eventually found the TF Green Airport, which is in Rhode Island. Granted, it is in Rhode Island, though the project in of itself is pretty similar in size, structure, environmental impacts to the Dayton Airport project. So firstly, the TF Green Airport and Dayton Airport, they're kind of similar C-tier airports where they're not, obviously not like your O'Hare's or Atlanta's or your O'Hara's, Atlanta's, JFK's, so they're not like huge airports, but they still do, folks fly out of the airports. So it's anywhere between, both of them are kind of skew between a million to about 3 million air travelers per year. Obviously with COVID, that number looks differently, but prior to the pandemic, that was kind of the area where each sat. The populations really are not the most similar, but like Dayton's 140,000 people, and Warwick, Rhode Island is about 81,000 people. So I guess it depends on your spectrum there that you're using. Though, thirdly, and I think probably more importantly, is both of the airport projects, they share similar ecosystems. On the right, I have kind of an aerial view of the TF Green Airport. So you see all the green space, that is surrounding the airport that is going to be expanded into a part of the project. So that is obviously a kind of a similar issue that we're seeing with the Knoop Prairie. And then my fourth point is basically that they share also in similar ambitions, both projects, and similar environmental impacts of kind of just destroying green space. So this is, I dove into some the socioeconomic context of Dayton, Ohio. I won't read everything on here, though. Kind of on a more macro scale, Dayton, Ohio, it's kind of your classic Rust Belt middle class city. In my opinion, I think on the whole, when we're thinking about the middle class, it probably skews a little bit closer to the lower end side of the middle class, though that's obviously an average. There are, the Dayton University is, it's a private institution, and it's very beautiful, and draws in from some very upper class areas in Dayton. Though on the whole, I think as we see in the second point, the median income is around only $30,000, a little bit above $30,000, and then the average property value is about $66,500. So it's pretty 66.5. Should clarify. So like I said, I'm not going to dive into everything. Though Dayton, it's 35% is of the population's on Medicaid, about 10% on Medicare. It's pretty nonpartisan, or I guess it votes back and forth, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In 2016, it voted for President Trump by about 3 points. It's definitely under 5. I can't remember the exact number, but it's under 5. So it was somewhat close. And then President Biden actually won Montgomery County, which I guess should clarify that is the county in which Dayton is located in Ohio. But President Biden won in 2020 by less than 1%, actually. It's about 0.5%. So I found that it was very, 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 very important for a drawn out scoping and public involvement process. I kind of drew upon my previous SIA critique on this, because I thought my previous SIA critique, or the SIA, I guess, that I critiqued, had a very robust public involvement process. So I kind of mirrored it after that. Though my EIS would require 10 community forums at different times throughout throughout varying times of the scoping process to compensate people's busy schedules, and these public involvement, these community forums, would kind of mirror, town halls almost in their kind of all-inclusive kind of idea, where, it would encourage community members to just come and provide them a safe space for them to express their feelings, thoughts, concerns regarding the project. The team also rely on household community questionnaires and facilitated focus groups that are socially distanced and stuff of that nature, given we're still living through a pandemic, and trying to plan as if the pandemic will still be a reality today, or as it is a reality today in the future. So the household community questionnaires can be very helpful in trying to keep people safe and not spread the virus. Also, it is super important that we are inclusive regarding who is actually on the the EIS team. We want folks who actually represent this area of Dayton and who are not just wealthy elitist white people. Rather, we want folks from a variety of cultures, races, ethnicities, a variety of education and expertise, and that come from a variety of socioeconomic statuses to broader kind of rally in the community. The community of Dayton to kind of get behind this project. So this picture here is a picture of prior the pandemic, of course. Of actually a community forum that was actually held. That, granted, there hasn't been an EIS or an SIA that has been done. This was rather just kind of like a part of a public education movement to kind of broaden the community's exposure to what was happening with the Dayton airport and how they were planning to basically level the Prairie. So they're trying to show people why why the Prairie needs to be protected. So I found that it was very important to have kind of just a robust assessment of regional impacts to further vet, if impacts we're expecting to be harmful or negative or even positive, that we have a metric of understanding if they're actually significant or not, if we were right in predicting those impacts. Split it into 4 phases, and these are relative to our textbook. These were outlined in our textbook, literally took them directly from the textbook. But phase 1 would be set in kind of like population impacts and trying to see based off how the population is changing, either growing or shrinking, to use that kind of as a metric to see if partially that is because of the development project. Secondly, the kind of taking a more community or institutional view of where specifically, we'd measure the impact of median income before and after the development project and see if there are any changes there. Measure how occupational opportunities vary. Are there more opportunities, less opportunities after this? Are businesses coming in? You know what I mean? And how is interest group activity varying before and after the project? So those are all important. Phase 3, kind of the impacts felt on the individual or family levels. How does this impact leisure activities in Dayton? You know what I mean? Obviously, they're not going to be able to go to the Prairie anymore, which was a very popular space for people to come and explore nature. How will this impact social networks, environmental groups, camping projects and such. And then the final phase, which would be kind of viewing how the project impacts like infrastructural needs in the community. So all of which I think are important point of views to be used to further parse through how the project of potentially leveling the Prairie could impact Dayton, either in a positive or negative way. I made this timeline, so I figured to make it easy on myself, it would begin in January 2022, where it's kind of a month-by-month spread. In January, we're waiting on the finalization of the environmental assessment by the NEPA, and then the notice of intent to then, make it clear to the public that there's going to be an EIS made. From February to April, we would continue that kind of robust public scoping period where we're getting to know the community, what they want, what's important, how that is applicable to the project in Knoop, Prairie. May to July would be the public involvement period where we're actually actively involving folks through those community forums in household questionnaires. From August to September, the first draft of the EIS would be completed, released to the public. October, the entire month of October would be the first public commenting period, where the team would be open to suggestions through community forums. And then to finish out the final EIS after the public commenting period, the final EIS is created and released to the public and effectively codified into law. So the impacts that we expected, I kind of split them into three phases. So we have the pre-constructual period, and that would include job creation, increased income, land exploitation of the prairie, and obviously loss of prairie land. During the construction period, what I think is most important is the impact of what's called PFAS, which has been found in the water system. PFAS is a very harmful toxin that is associated with, building stuff. Given how close the development project is to the Willis Creek, that can be very harmful, especially because it is was originally a space of kind of groundwater recharge for the water that is used as the source of water for Dayton. And then other impacts of the construction period would be air pollution, increased waste, harm to the local watershed, like I was explaining. Scenic landscapes would be leveled, stuff of that nature. Harm to biodiversity, of course. And then the third phase or stage, I guess, would be the post-construction and I guess like the actual operation of the airport. So obviously that's going to harm specifically other biodiversity, means of biodiversity in the area. The further development of PFAS in the area, the admission of carbon into our atmosphere, all of which are social impact, areas of social impact, social, economic, and environmental impact, and then all of them put together. Okay, yeah, so this further looks into the PFAS. So we can see here in the top right, the arrows point in the direction of the drainage of the orange area, which would be the orange area of the Knoop Prairie, obviously. So it's pretty much dumping straight into the Willis Creek watershed, which obviously is extremely harmful and can have an extreme impact on human health. Some mitigations. I came up with three important ones. I would firstly delegate the Ohio EPA to further research PFAS levels. This includes where PFAS is present and where it is most toxic and how it has in fact actually affected Dayton's water supply. I think it would be very important to, if it is found to be bad, to involve the federal government, either it be the CDC or the EPA, both, to study health impacts, and then the impact of that in our water source of PFAS, and then to then employ FEMA, a federal agency, to provide clean drinking water. Secondly, would be to provide the Allwood Audubon other land in Dayton that would be equal in square footage to land that the city reclaimed for the airport extension. Thirdly, the Dayton Airport will invest. It would be very important for the Dayton Airport to invest in creating carbon sinks, so planting trees to absorb the extra carbon that they will be emitting into the atmosphere. And then the monitoring program, so split it into 4 stages: the pre-construction stage, the construction stage, the operational stage, and decommissioning stage, if it be necessary. So there'd be monitoring is used to ensure the baseline necessary information is collected for the target area of the prairie. Monitoring in the development project broader. Number 2, the monitoring is used to quantify levels of pollution that come directly from the infrastructure's construction, so from the airport. And then during the operational phase, point 3 would be the monitoring is used to show the normal day-to-day usages of the infrastructure at its normal use and how this impacts the environment broader. I found that On a whole, my ESIA that I've created pretty much, you know, to a T, hits all 6 SIA principles. And then lastly, this last picture I thought was really important and really cool. It may just look like kind of a you know, just a cool shot picture, but this actually was taken by, I'm pretty sure it was a New York Times article, photojournalist, that was then put in the New York Times article. This was actually taken at the Knoop Prairie. So these are you know, some grains that we see at Knoop Prairie, and at the top here, kind of towards the top of the photograph, you see an airplane, and that is obviously an airplane coming from, I don't know if it's actually coming from or going to the Dayton airport, but you kind of get to see the interaction of both and how it is, you know, going to become a pretty difficult issue. But with that being said, that is my presentation. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.